Welcome to today's webinar in the Knowledge Miles series, part of the Lord Mayor's lectures on behalf of Professor Michael Mainelli, whose theme for his mayoral year is Connect to Prosper. In this free online lecture series, we address the connections in and around the square mile, what Michael likes to call the world's coffee house, and how these might help us to tackle future global challenges. I'm Professor Tim Connell, Chairman of the Gresham Society and a Fellow of Gresham College here in the City of London, and I'm also a liveryman of the Stationers' Company, so I look forward to hearing more about 3D printing. I'll be convening this session and moderating the questions and answers after today's lecture. So this is the plan very briefly for today. I will give a quick introduction. We then get the keynote presentation from Nate and Joel, and we then have about 20 minutes for questions. It's worth pointing out here that one of the Lord Mayor's aims in setting up these webinars is to showcase the work of the city livery companies, and in this case, the Worshipful Company of Glovers. They actually go back to 1349, but they didn't get their charter until 1638. So in city terms, they're a fairly recent company. Today we have a really interesting topic: new frontiers in assistive tech, bionic prosthetics and soft prosthetics, and you couldn't be much more forward-looking than that. So I'm delighted to welcome today Nate McAboig and Joel Gibbard. Nate and Joel, could you perhaps tell us a bit more about yourselves?
Absolutely. Shall I go first, Nate?
Please do.
Hi, everyone. My name's Joel Gibbard, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Open Bionics. I studied robotics for my undergrad degree and developed a passion for biomimetic robotics, that is, robotics that imitates nature, and in particular, the human hand, and developed a fascination with it and wanted to pursue some noble path towards trying to make a positive impact through my passion for robotics. And that was how I came to co-found a company that makes bionic arms. Over to you, Nate.
Oh, thank you, Joe. So I'm Nate McAboig. So I'm founder of a company called Koalaa, and we make soft prosthetics. So in a nutshell, we make prosthetic limbs, but we make them like items of clothing. So they're flexible and fabric and soft, and we'll get into that. But this is particularly fun for me because when I was at uni, Open Bionics was sort of starting to get out there. And so I sort of fangirled over Joel for a long time. So to be talking on the same talk with him is pretty special for me personally. So looking forward to chatting. And also I hate monologuing, so bring in questions as well. So lots of questions, please, so we can chat.
Oh, there'll be lots of questions, don't worry. Now, can you tell us more then about new frontiers in assistive tech and developments in bionic prosthetics and soft prosthetics?
Tim, I think you dropped out for me for a minute, but I'm assuming this is over to me. So let me, just quickly just to introduce myself and the company. So my company is called Open Bionics, and we make upper limb prosthetics for people with limb loss and living with upper limb differences. And our core product is a bionic hand. We've delivered over 700 of those in the past 6 years or so. And my personal passion, as I mentioned, came from studying robotics and developing a real passion for bionic hands. Something for me, I was just extremely fascinated by the complexity of the design of the human hand and whether or not that could be replicated in an artificial way. And around the time, just after graduating from my degree, I met my now co-founder, Samantha, and we decided that we wanted to start a company to address the challenge of making functional prosthetics more accessible for people with limb loss. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that journey, a bit about what we learned that was challenging within the industry, and what we've done ultimately to try and solve problems people with limb loss are facing. And so for us, it started with learning a little bit more about what was available, what the clinical pathway was for people with upper limb loss. And what we discovered in our research was that the industry was very commercially motivated and sort of structured. And what I mean by that is the key stakeholders whose needs had been considered in the design of prosthetic limbs were people funding them, like insurance companies and the clinical professionals who were the decision makers about what prosthetics they were going to buy. And so we found actually the patient voice was neglected, and end users who were actually going to be wearing prosthetics day to day hadn't really been consulted to a great length on what they wanted or what they needed. And we decided from the very beginning that we were going to try to focus our energy on learning and understanding the needs of the end user. And so there's good and bad that's come with that. But one of the great things is that we've been able to really understand how prosthetics can benefit people, and really focus our efforts on that. So just to kind of frame where things were when we began, while there were bionic hands coming to market, they were quite exclusively priced. So what that meant was that the average person visiting their NHS limb centre, for example, was going to receive a prosthesis that had hardly changed in design in the last 100 years. And so it would have a body-powered harness as a means of activating the hand. It was handmade in a workshop local to the patient. It had a single movement to open and close a hook-like terminal device, which was sprung closed. So that means that you have to make compensatory movements to get any functionality from the prosthesis. And the grip that you were able to achieve. And what we learned speaking to a large number of patients was that there were three core problems with the prosthesis that they were being offered. And those were that they were very heavy, uncomfortable to wear, typically because they're not breathable, and they often were using very hard materials, and ugly. And by that, I mean the original innovations in prosthetics were done sort of post-World War I, and they were looked at very much as a replacement for a human limb. And so the design approach that was taken was to try to replicate the aesthetic of a human limb with this skin-colored surface finish. And that didn't really account for people that had been born with a limb difference, and they weren't necessarily looking at a prosthesis as a replacement. They might actually be looking at it more as a piece of wearable technology. And so we came to understand these problems, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. So if you think about the aesthetic of a prosthesis, I like to draw the comparison with eyewear as a corollary, because in that market, you have something which is providing corrective lenses, so it has a medical purpose. But actually, for most people, when they're considering which glasses to buy, they're not thinking for a second about the lenses. They're thinking much more about the frames. They're thinking about how they're going to look, how they're going to make them feel, how they're going to be perceived. And for most people, and for a lot of children, if their glasses don't make them feel confident and people don't perceive them in a positive way, they're not going to want to wear them, regardless of the corrective function they might be providing. And we found that this was enormously overlooked in the prosthetics segment, and particularly for children. So we encouraged the people we were speaking with to get creative and kind of tell us what would they want their prosthesis to look like, and try to talk about that in a very unconstrained way. And what we found was that people very much did have unusual opinions about what the prosthesis could look like, and indeed what it could do. And they didn't look at it as a replacement human limb. They looked at it as something that maybe it can do things that a human hand cannot do, and certainly look ways that a human hand does not look. So this was something that we explored and drew a lot of inspiration from. And the other core technology that we were looking at and we discovered in our process of starting the company was digital manufacturing technologies. So we were looking at 3D scanning and 3D printing, and we recognized that these technologies could offer some very significant and pertinent benefits. So for example, the upper limb prosthetics is quite niche, so there aren't that many patients. So if you've got a technician hand building your prosthesis, it's possible that that person either has never built an upper limb prosthesis before or has only built a few of them. And so you're really reliant on that person's experience and expertise. And with 3D printing, we can create consistent quality, meaning no matter whether the technician has a lot of experience or not so much experience, we can build the same product. And the other thing that these technologies give us is the ability to store the source design files digitally. So, for example, we've met patients who happened to get a really good fitting prosthesis when they were, say, 30 years old, and they wear it for 20 years and it's completely worn out, but maybe it took them 7 or 8 tries to get that fit, and they're nervous about upgrading because it might not be as comfortable. And the benefit of using 3D technologies is that we have that memory, and we could, in the future, once a prosthesis has worn out, if it fit the patient really well, we can rebuild one to the exact same design specification. So those are some of the key things. The final one is the ability to have a little bit more design flexibility. And so we've been able to design new features into the prosthesis to make it more comfortable and ventilated and lighter weight. So this is what we came up with. This was our first product, the Hero Arm. So you've got it. So I also share on video. So let me unblur my background. So this is a Hero Arm. So it's got sensors on the inside that will move the fingers, and you can change grip modes. So that's some of the core functionality, but what's particularly unique about it is the way that it's designed and built. So it's all 3D printed. We've got this open core design, which provides ventilation, and then a flexible liner. So you've got more give compared with a sort of single part, single shell traditional prosthesis. So then the other major thing I wanted to point out was the covers. So we've got these removable covers. So they snap on magnetically, and you can choose your style and design to suit you. And these are some of the different cover designs we've been fortunate enough to have an ongoing relationship with the Walt Disney Company and have licensed their IP to design the different covers from Black Panther to Iron Man. So you can imagine for kids the impact this can have among their peers, where suddenly they're wearing the Iron Man arm and all of their kids want one but can't have it, and it creates a environment where they can feel very positively about their limb difference rather than feeling self-conscious about it. So we found this to be a hugely impactful component to the design. In terms of where we are now, over the last 12 months or so, we've brought out 2 new products, the Hero Gauntlet and the Hero Flex. So these are new prosthetic limbs. The Hero Gauntlet's for people with partial hand limb loss. So if they just lost all or some of their fingers. And the Hero Flex is specifically for sports and activities. So the attachment in the image there is for cycling, but you can wear it for musical instruments, kayaking, things like that, more high level activities where you might want to get it wet or push the limits of what you can do. So that's where we are now. What's coming next is we would like to expand our product range to address more segments of limb loss. So above elbow limb loss and finger limb loss are areas that we're interested in pursuing in the future. And the other thing I was going to quickly mention, more to invite questions than anything else, was that we're starting to think about how we might be able to use machine learning within the clinical process as well. So right now, all we're doing is collecting data, but the idea is that we collect the base scan of somebody's limb, and then we record the changes that are made to that base scan by the prosthetist. So for example, they'll often pinch in by the elbow to make sure that it stays on the arm. And then we'll learn from the patient whether it was a good fit or a bad fit. So we'll collect patient feedback. And so with those different touch points along the clinical journey, we can start to build up a database, and then hopefully turn the sort of the art of designing a prosthesis into something that's a little bit more scientifically informed, because we would really be able to hone in on what was it about that. So this is something that we're very interested in the future, is potential applications of machine learning. So that's it from me. Apologies if my signal dropped out a couple of times there. I tried to stop when that happened, so hopefully people didn't miss anything. But I'll hand over to Nate at this point.
Can you guys hear me okay? I hope so. Thumbs up, yay! Thank you, Joel. What's beautiful is you did all the background, so now I can just waffle for 10 minutes, which is epic. So, yes, so user-led design is, I'm so glad you touched on that, Joel, because that is just the lifeblood of, I think, actually making anything good, but certainly if you're making a medical device, and certainly ones that people wear, like prosthetics. As you might have gathered from this talk, this is about prosthetics that are a little bit different. So like Joel, we make prostheses a little bit differently. Our sort of core technology, if you call it that, is the fact that ours are soft. So ours are like shoes and items of clothing that you'd wear. But I'll get to that. This all started from an interaction, a meeting with one incredibly cool dude called Alex. So Alex is himself a designer and a dad and a world traveler and adventurer and general amazing person. But he's also a quadruple amputee, which means he lost both of his arms and both of his legs, both of his arms and both of his legs back in 2013 to sepsis, and which started him on this journey of being thrust into a world where you have to wear devices to try and help you get by. That journey took him from university to university to university, essentially trying to work with students to make something brand new and something that he would want to wear. So that's where he met us. So that's me, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I have more grey hairs now. That wasn't actually that long ago, but it feels like a real long time ago. So I did mechanical engineering at a university called Imperial College in London. And in your third year of your project, in third year of your degree, you get into project groups and you decide to make something. And I had actually seen, I think, one of Joel's videos for some of the first Open Bionics limbs, 3D printed. I knew that it had come out of a student project, and I was sort of like, wow, I just want to do that. So we were thrust backwards into the idea that, man, this is a great opportunity to do our uni project, do something cool, and also, trick the university into letting us build an Iron Man suit. So let's build some bionic prosthetics. And that's what we did. This is the first one we made. I'm not very good at it. Joel's very good at it. I was not. I actually have it here. I don't know if you can see. Can folks see my screen when I'm talking? I don't know. I'm looking for a thumb. Oh, a thumbs up as well. Great. Okay. So this is this monstrosity that I made, that the four of us made in university, because our supervisor at the time had the forethought to introduce us to Alex. We met him. We're thoroughly excited to meet him. And thought he'd be, walking in on bionic legs and having 2 bionic arms, but he didn't. He came in a wheelchair, and he was wearing hooks like this, because as Joe mentioned, like in modern day prosthetics, it's not like on TV. This is still what people get. It really is World War I, World War II technology. We were asking him, Alex, what do you want from your prosthetic limb? He was like, I want to hold a pen. And we're like, okay, I'll make you a bionic hand that holds a pen. And this was after 9 months of toiling away. This is the best we could come up with. As you can tell, Alex was deeply thrilled with it. But actually, it was quite a pivotal moment in just sort of personally my journey in life, but also in how Koalaa came to be. In that we had this hand. I'll tell you a very short anecdote. So we had this hand, and for love nor money, I couldn't get this to hold a pen. Like Joel will attest, like holding a pen is such a delicate motion to get something that's 5-fingered actuated to do that. It was very difficult. So Alex was coming in, and we had to test this hand with him to get some semblance of a grade. And so the night before, I went onto Amazon and got some 50p pen clips, and if you can see that, I just attached them to the palm. So you clip the pen in, and then the fingers move around to grab it. I was like, okay, that'll do. That'll get us a grade. And the other thing as well is we didn't realize until he was coming in, it was like, holy moly, we have no idea how to put this hand on him. There's no way for him to wear it. We can't make sockets. We don't know how to make these rigid things. We don't have his limb measurements. We don't know how to put this on him. But I did have access to the costumes department, like the Musical Theatre Society. So we snuck in, stole some sewing machines, and grabbed some fabric and essentially sewed like a fabric bag and attached it to the back of the hand. Okay, that'll do. That'll get us a grade. So he put it on, and he was like, this thing's ridiculous, but I kind of really like it. And we're like, do you really enjoy it? He was like, yeah, I love this pen clip. I'm like, Alex, no, look at my fingers, look at these mechanisms and this intricate design. He's like, that's fine, but this pen clip's so simple. I can just touch on and I've got it. That's so simple and nice. He said, the other thing as well, I've never had a socket that fits first time. This is great. This is really comfy and really soft. And so we're sort of looking at it like, wow. So the things that took us combined about 30 minutes is what Alex loved. And the things that took me quite literally 9 months of up all night doing CAD to make the hand, he didn't really care about. And this just hammered home and hit us in the head with, it's so important to talk to people who use your device or whatever it is you're trying to make. And now it feels obvious. Like, I don't wear prosthetic limbs, so my opinion doesn't matter. So we're always talking to people who actually use them, because you get unintuitive answers. And so what that led us down was a completely different path of, okay, well, let's focus on those things. So again, this is still while I was at university, but this was the first design that he really, really liked. And you can actually see, so it's just a basketball sleeve with some bits of plastic that I used a hairdryer to melt. And yes, that is quite literally an Allen key that's holding the end together where the pen attaches. And he slipped it on, and the first thing Alex started doing was signing his name, his signature. And he was like, gents, I haven't done this in 6 years. This is insane. And it just sort of showed to us like, wow, okay, so focusing on the simplicity of the things that he actually wants to do is something worth pursuing. And that's just sort of underpins everything we do since. So this is how we design products. I was still at uni. I managed to get a little bit of funding. I mean, at the time, this was more money than I could fathom, but it was just enough to not take a job and to do this full time. Carried on. In 2020, and this is how we got introduced to the Glovers, who brought us here today. Very thankful for. So at the start of 2020, when the world sort of ended for a bit, if you remember that, we were approached by a bunch of charities saying, look, our fundraising activities have sort of ceased, but we've seen what you do and that you can make these prosthetics very quickly, very low cost. Can we do that for every child in the UK? It's called Project Limitless, and so we spent most of 2020 and 2021 sending limbs through the post during a global pandemic to people all over the world. That's pretty awesome. And it's this is what sparked our knowledge, or sort of our realization of the global challenge that Joel sort of spoke to. So just to put it in context, there's about 21 million people around the world who have some form of upper limb difference. The vast majority of those don't live in places like this. They live in middle and low income countries, where you can imagine there are lots of barriers to accessing any kind of healthcare, let alone these kind of devices. And so the result is that 90% of people in the world who need a prosthetic limb, or who might enjoy using a prosthetic limb, have zero access. So not that they have the opportunity and say no, they don't have the option even in the first place. And this is kind of what we're trying to address. So I'll just quickly explain what it is we actually make. So it's soft prosthetics. It's taking the bits that Alex loved and really honing in on it. They're built like shoes. They're built like clothes. So the bit that you wear is very much like a sneaker. It's flexible where it needs to be, but tough where it also needs to be. So it's flexible, adjustable, fitting. You can now do in a few minutes instead of going to a clinic for multiple sessions over weeks. And then the end attachments, we just have different tools that clip in and do different things. This one's for like press ups and body weight things, but you can imagine we have dozens and dozens of these. So it's much more like a Swiss Army knife. And what that allows you to do is meet people all over the planet by just putting them in a bag and sending them to places. So we're just approaching our 1500th user in every continent except Antarctica. But when we get there, that will be pretty cool. And it's just it's incredibly fun because it's been 4 years now, and we've literally worked with teeny tiny tots all the way up to full adults, from people who are just starting out in activity to literal Paralympians, every continent, every climate, and had the opportunity to do phenomenal things like go to fashion shows, to Joel's point about making these things beautiful things you want to wear, but also the reality of going to conflict zones and be like, hey, this is what these technology can allow people to do in some of the toughest places on the planet. So yes, that's probably a nice place to stop. That's a little touch on what we do and how we do it. Thank you. Please ask questions so that we've got stuff to talk about. Yeah.
Right, well, Nate and Joel, thank you very much indeed for that. The first question actually comes from Marek Kuzminski, who says, is there any possibility to become part of the design research regarding prosthesis for preschool and children in early stage of education with congenital upper limbs amputation and differences? The first thing I'd say is thank you very much for putting your contact details into the last slide. Not all of our speakers do that. That's very useful. Yes, Joel and Nate, what do you think?
I mean, 100%. So, like I said, the first couple of years of us working, we were working predominantly only with children. And when you work with children with limb difference, it's normally congenital, depending on where you are on the planet. So it's normally from birth. And there's just not a lot of research at all. There's a couple of organizations doing cool stuff like Bold Kids, which if you haven't come across them, I'd recommend reaching out. We can do introductions and stuff. But 100%, I think it needs more smart people looking at it, to be honest. There's plenty of folk who could, who want us to make new stuff for them and find out new things. But that's just what I think. What do you reckon, Joe?
Well, as we saw from one of your later slides, there is massive demand for this and worldwide. So I do hope that a sponsor or two might be watching. Now, Robert Pynchon is asking, he has a background in product safety and standardization. So he'd like to know, how has AI impacted the wearers of future prosthetics? Was all of this possible before AI?
Oh, Joel, that's definitely you.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. We've not used AI at all in anything we've done to date. So we did not need AI to get to where we are. That is defined.
Gosh, that does surprise me. I thought all of this would have been bounced by, 3D printing presumably is an AI element in all of this.
No, I mean, some 3D printers have some fledgling AI-based features, but no, it's not. It's just toolpaths. So yeah, I don't think it's not been needed. It could enhance certain areas. So I think areas where it could be enhanced is, I suppose, like grasping capability one day could probably be AI enhanced, but questionable whether or not that would really be sort of needed. I think the two major things are in the design side of things. So being able to predict how well the prosthesis will fit before it's been fit could be incredibly useful, and I think AI could help with that. And the other one is in the control system. So we use myoelectric sensors, which read signals from the muscles. That's very rudimentary at the moment. And I believe that if you had good data acquisition and machine learning doing a good job of interpreting those signals, you could get more sophisticated control.
Yeah, that. I guess also enough is that, so Alex used to make this joke all the time, but like when we were first in the first devices, that's when Alexa was starting to become a thing. And he was generally saying, like, it's really helpful for lots of stuff. You know, if you think about being at home, I can turn on my lights, turn on my TV, change the channel. I can do lots of things now by voice. And so I don't know, but I do wonder how much these assistants will help with things like that, for things that don't need to be done by a prosthetic.
Well,
So
Nate,
yeah.
perhaps you better go back to Imperial and suggest that another third-year student
I should, yeah. Well,
actually didn't
more
exist.
projects in time. Yeah, definitely. It's a great
There's
idea.
a challenge for Imperial. Now, Robert Pynchon has another question, in fact, about the developments in nanotechnology, which he says are phenomenal. What has been the most influencing factor to your production development and costs? I thought it wouldn't be long before costs came up,
Of nanotechnology.
presumably.
That's interesting. Do you do anything in that sort of space, Joe?
The only nanotechnology that we've been exploring is to add touch sensitivity to the fingers of the hand. So that there's like carbon nanotubes you can add to the urethane and
We've
um,
lost.
yeah, I should be. Am I back? Yeah. So
Yes,
we
you're
we
back now. Good. Yeah.
yeah. So adding carbon nanotubes to the urethane pads on the fingers enables them to be touchscreen compatible. In terms of like cost reducing technologies, ultimately, I think it will be the 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 digital design technologies will reduce the cost a lot. I don't think most of those cost benefits have been realized yet, but we can very much see a trajectory towards that happening.
Right. Clive Bullen is asking, how long does each arm or artificial limb actually last? You mentioned that the old-fashioned ones needed changing sort of every 20 years. Do you know what the design life or user life is of these devices?
I think for us, we give our products a lifespan of 5 years. For kids, they would need to change the upgrade them in a much shorter time frame than that, or at least parts of them as they're growing. So yeah, I think it kind of depends. Like if treated well, it could last a lot longer than 5 years. But that's what we in our sort of technical documentation. That is the lifespan that we attribute to the product. I don't know about you, Nate.
Yep. Yeah, it's as you say, it depends on how it's treated. But for ours, because they're literally made like clothes and like shoes, I would use the analogy of, however long a good pair of sneakers lasts. So if you're a young kid, you're changing your shoes maybe every 12 months, maybe even more often if you're growing very rapidly. Slightly less for these because you can sort of grow into them, like quite literally. But for adults, yeah, we normally say maybe 18 months, 2 years after maybe the odd thread might start to fray, you might want to refresh. But we've had ones in the field and in like, in quite rough parts of the planet, like Sierra Leone, for years at this point. So it really does depend on how you treat them. The good thing with some of these things, like because we use a lot of textiles, and textiles have obviously been around with us for thousands of years. They're really tough, really, really tough, surprisingly so. So yeah, they last if you design them right.
Are there any other materials that you might be able to move on to other than what's available at the moment?
Oh gosh, yeah. So many. That's often part of it. Our main innovations will come from just playing with different materials. I mean, even for fabrics, there's so many different types. And when you talk about like nanotechnology, there's sort of advanced materials that do, sort of they have actually inbuilt sort of intelligence into them, either by their structure or integration with electronics. So there's stuff there. And then just the way we make our plastic parts, there's all kinds of different things we could start to explore. We iterate so fast. So normally by the time that we start thinking about optimizing one design, we're already on to the next one. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that is a problem. Now, I was very impressed with the early device for actually, for signing one's own name, and the idea of having a kind of Black & Decker drill fitting on the end, so you do different jobs, you sort of put a different bit on. I thought it was very impressive. But you mentioned playing music. Now, in my time, I was a clarinetist, and I have to say that the holes are rather close together. Can you actually bring the whole thing down to a size where you can actually operate one finger very close to each other?
Yeah, so scaling down the size is one of the challenges. We designed the original Hero arm to have a very small hand size comparative to other products in the industry, to the point that it was about the right size for the average 8-year-old child. But yeah, you wouldn't be able to play a clarinet with it for various other reasons. I mean, you might be able
Don't
to
worry,
hold
I couldn't play it much either. Yeah.
Yeah, we did have someone do a trumpet recital wearing a Hero arm, but they were using it to support the trumpet rather than actually press the pumps valves. But yeah, definitely possible.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased to say that the sordid question of money and finance and funding has come up. I'm surprised that was the latest question. I thought it might be the first. But Mark Butler is asking a non-technical question. Let's move away from the technology, which none of us really are. Has the NHS shown any interest in what you're doing so that they can progress from this heavy hook option, which I believe they currently offer?
I'll go first, Nate, and then hand over to you. So where it comes to our product, we've been effectively lobbying the NHS since day one, and made some progress recently. So a couple of years ago, they began commissioning multi-grip bionic hands. So they launched a new policy, multi-grip bionic hand policy, and they now do routinely fund them, but with a reasonably hefty selection criteria for patients. So once you pass that criteria, they will fund one of these hands. And we've now sold a few to the NHS, maybe five or six. But that will gradually increase over time. It's just incredibly slow moving, and it's a big battle to get any progress there. But that's where we've got to. How about you, Nate?
It is just slow. So we set up Koalaa properly in March of 2020, and so then we heard of what's called the NHS supply chain. So our devices needed to be on NHS supply chain list, and so we called them up and said, "Oh, can we help? What's the process to join?" They said, "No problem. This is the process. It will be open again in 5 years' time." So it's like we just had to wait 5 years, and so now that 5 years is rolling
Nate,
around.
you were lucky that you even found someone that knew what the process was.
Yeah, there's lots I could say, but it's difficult. It's difficult and it's slow. What I would say is I'm constantly surprised by how open the clinicians are. So prosthetists, OTs, PTs in the NHS centres are so welcoming and so open to trying new things and working with us, and we learn from them. And so that's what gives me a lot of hope. So that kind of swell of support, I'm sure it's almost definitely the same for you, Joe, but that swell of support is what does help us move things through the NHS. So eventually we will be provided through it at some point. It's just a matter of when.
What about the armed forces? Have you had much of a response from them?
Actually, more so. One of the first or second people we spoke to, so this is going back to when I was still in university. The first organisations that actually answered my email was Blesma, which is the armed force charity. Phenomenally helpful, so unduly helpful. Bear in mind we were literally students at the time. So they introduced us to our first clinicians, they introduced us to our first users, and actually a lot of the projects we do overseas, in some way has sort of links back to introductions they've made. So and they continue to be really helpful. So more and more, but yes, quicker than the NHS.
What about funding from the American Army? Is this the sort of thing they might be interested in?
The US is very new for us, but we're hoping so. We're hoping so. You're much more developed there, Joe.
Yeah, we just got our first contract with the Veterans Association in the US. So the first VA-funded prosthesis that we deliver, we should get the order in the next couple of days. But yeah, it's been pretty positive. There's just a lot of kind of bureaucracy to get through to actually get a contract, but it's just part of the sector, I think.
Yes. Most of your examples have been about prosthetic arms. Are you involved in doing feet or legs at all?
Couldn't possibly say.
Not yet.
One day.
We're not just yet, because there's still so much to do on the one of the reasons that we focused on upper limb prosthetics. Well, originally it was technological interest, but as we've learned to understand more about the market, we've come to realize that there's much more market potential in lower limb prosthetics. There's about 5 to 10 times as many people with lower limb loss compared with upper limb loss. But in consequence, it's received a lot more attention, a lot more funding. So the need is not as great. And so if we were to enter that market, I think we would need a really good reason for doing so. That is to say, I think the expertise we have, we can actually make a big impact in the upper limb prosthetics segment, whereas in lower limb prosthetics right now, we would be another player in a market that may not necessarily need another player. So I would, if we had a compelling reason for doing so, and then we have a few interesting ideas, but haven't really had the bandwidth to explore them just yet.
I think that's right. The amount of times that people would say to, especially at the start, they're like, "Oh, why don't you go into legs? Because there's way more opportunity there." And again, so we set up as a company purely by accident. It wasn't the plan just to run a company. Like, I wanted an easy life, and this is not that. But it was exactly what Joel said. Is that the result is that people with upper limb difference have seen no massive changes in the products they can get for a very long time. So we just find it's very rewarding to do stuff new in upper limb.
Robert Pinchon is asking again as to whether the government could accelerate or encourage product development and export market growth. Is there any possible source of support for export markets?
Yeah, they do quite a lot, I would say, compared to sort of international compatriots, other people in other companies doing things from other countries that I've spoken to. So we have been quite fortunate. We've benefited from the R&D tax credit scheme, for example. Every year we've been running. So cumulatively, I don't know how much money that's been for our company, but probably, yeah, certainly over £500,000. We've also benefited from the enterprise investment scheme. So investors that have invested in our company have made investments using that scheme, which gives them tax breaks. And without that scheme, I don't think there would have been anywhere near as much funding available for the sort of stage of business that we were at. So those are two I would say two very successful government policies that have driven a lot of innovation. So the R&D tax credit's been kind of diluted a little bit. They're not offering as much money for it now, but what we have seen is a bit of an uptick in the amount of grants that are available after the UK leaving the EU. So there's been some grant opportunities. We won one last year. We're applying for another one at the moment. So I would say, all in all, that government support has been very good, I would say, from our perspective.
All right. That's encouraging. Now, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions, but it's worth mentioning that if you've enjoyed this session, you might look elsewhere in the Lord Mayor's lecture series. On the 3rd of July 2024, we had a lecture on the subject of haptic gloves. And would you believe that was also sponsored by the Worshipful Company of Glovers. So might I put in a plug here for the Stationers Company. We've also been very interested in 3D printing. And curiously enough, back in the 15th century, we were quite keen to move on from quill pens to block print. Now, let's just have a quick look at what's coming up. On the 15th of August, a couple of days, disabled entrepreneurs in London, and whether they're getting a fair deal. Next week, the 21st of August, working through August, folks, look at this, a positive approach to an older demographic using blue zones and evergreen lenses. Another quite forward-looking topic, I would say. And on the 22nd of August, going back to our historic roots, let's grab a coffee, the history of the London coffee houses. I'm sure that our Lord Mayor will be watching that one because he's very keen on the world's coffee house topic. So thank you very much to everyone in the audience, and a particular thank you to Nate and Joel. This has been quite a remarkable session in that I think we're all sort of, we recognise the question of prosthetic names and the rest going back to the First World War and presumably before, and the way in which the technology has just blossomed in recent years is really quite remarkable. And I think every credit and a big round of applause is coming round from all of our viewers to Nate and Joel as well. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you of course to the audience, and we look forward to seeing you again in the Lord Mayor's lectures. And don't forget, Michael Mainelli's theme for the year is Connect to Prosper. Thank you and goodbye to everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.